Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Breaking Barriers. And of course, we're talking my favourite subject, menopause. And we have a wonderful expert to interview to share lots of tips and strategies with us today. And if you are watching live, feel free to drop a question. So we have Dr. Laura Wyness. I just realised I never checked it's the pronunciation of your surname. Have I got that right?
Yeah, well, Wyness is the way I pronounce
Wyness.
it in the
Sorry,
drink, but yeah,
Wyness.
it's fine.
Yeah. Oh, that's very apt. Dr. Laura Wyness. Apologies. That is really poor of me because I've just been calling you Laura, obviously. And Laura is a registered nutritionist and came to my attention through my EA actually, and I was delighted to hear about Laura, especially because she authored a book, Eating Well for Menopause, and I know, having been working in this area, having experienced a lot of the challenges. Actually, nutrition was the first thing that I went to. So, like many women, I was feeling low in energy and reaching for the wrong foods, feeling low and then reaching for sugar. So I knew I had to do something, but I didn't know about you then, Laura. She's almost 20 years experience working in academic research, nutrition policy and food innovation. And a few years ago, you started your own nutrition consultancy, providing workplace wellness talks, online nutrition consultations, and nutrition research and writing services. And in recent years, Laura's been focused on supporting women around midlife and menopause. And we're going to hear about that story and how she came to this. And you've got a particular set of skills, as Liam Neeson might say, in helping women prepare for and navigate through menopause and encouraging a healthy relationship with food, which I know for certain has been a really challenging thing personally. And so I'm excited to speak to you and hear all about it. So welcome, Laura.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
So tell us, like, you're obviously not born a menopause expert or a nutritionist. How did you end up going into that line of work? And, give us a bit about your story.
Yeah, gosh. So I've always been interested in nutrition. Grew up on a farm as well, so love that connection between food and health. And started off my life after I did my degrees in nutrition, working in academia in the research side of things. So I loved just researching things and analysing the research and then communicating it in a way that's understood by most people. And so I worked in academia for a number of years on systematic reviews of evidence, on Cochrane reviews and NICE reviews of technology assessment reviews, which are kind of like the gold standard of systematic reviews. And then kind of moved around a little bit. So my career, I've had experience in academia. I then moved into like a government agency over in Ireland. I worked for the Women's Health Council, which was actually doing systematic reviews on women's health issues. That was about 20 years ago. And actually one of the reviews I did was on menopause, or managing menopause, and created a little booklet, information booklet for women, which was great to think that they were kind of 20 years ahead of kind of where we are now. So that was really interesting. And then I moved to London and got more experience working with, again, doing research for industry, the food industry, and more communications of nutrition. And that led me to be really interested in how to communicate well, the science. And then after 4 years in London, I'm a country girl at heart. So I moved out of the city, back to Scotland, based in Edinburgh now. Did a little bit more in academia, working in food innovation, developing new products. And then finally made the jump to going freelance about 8 years ago now, which is when I started doing one-to-one nutrition consultations, nutrition writing, workplace wellness talks. And it was through the one-to-ones that I was having with many midlife women, menopausal women, who are wanting to know, what can I do to help with symptoms? How can I maintain my health? So I think you get to that stage in life where your body starts being a bit more noisy. You have aches and pains, or you're not as quick to recover from a night out, or things. You notice things a bit more. So diet can have a huge impact on your health and wellness. So I was getting a lot of questions from women saying, what can I eat for helping with this perimenopause journey? And there wasn't a lot of information out there at the time. So that's when I really started getting interested in finding out a bit more about it and how to support women with sharing the evidence, or what evidence we have, and also where there's still gaps, what we don't know. There's still a lot of unanswered questions. But
yeah, absolutely. And it's really good to hear that journey, because you were ahead of the curve. And it's interesting to hear about Ireland 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I think things may have stalled a little bit on that, but good to hear there was
something. Yeah.
And I suppose one of the words that has only recently come up is perimenopause, and we'll get into all of that in a moment. But one of the things that struck me as you were talking there, Laura, and one of the reasons why I brought you on, is the depth of your research. And there's so much noise out there on social media, on TikTok, on Instagram, wherever your place is. And I'm sure it must be frustrating to hear just absolute nonsense being shared. I'm sure there's great stuff, but also absolute nonsense. And for you to have that depth of research, so is that something that frustrates you?
Yes, very much so. So I think now menopause is beginning to get talked about a lot more. There's a lot more research and awareness of it, and a lot more talk. But with that comes a lot more misinformation as well, that's not necessarily evidence-based. And I think it's still an area where there's a lot of research gaps, and there's still a lot of, as I say, unanswered questions. Yeah. So that just kind of helps amplify the misunderstanding, or people trying to join the dots where there aren't any dots, and just adds to the confusion. So there's a lot of misinformation, washing, because it's big business.
I was just going to say that. Yeah.
And there's a lot of, I learned a new word as well, it's science exploitation as well. So companies or brands using scientifically sounding words to make it sound like, this is impressive and does more than what it says on the tin type of thing, but it's kind of meaningless in a scientific world.
And we've had that a lot in the beauty industry. Lots of weird and wonderful terms that seem to have been invented, but also, like, it's been around for years in nutrition. Making things green, calling them natural, and all of that kind of stuff that actually really tricks your brain. And so now there's a new marketing hook to get us.
It's difficult to navigate through, and even I see some posts and I think, is that true? Or take a double take and think, oh, this is have a look at the evidence, and this is actually what's right. And it is really challenging to navigate because there's so much noise. And there was a study recently that showed on social media that around about 2% of the nutrition information on social media is accurate. So it's not a lot of accurate nutrition information. So it's not the best place to get nutrition information from.
Oh my goodness.
Just because there's so much inaccuracies.
Wow. That is a shocking statistic right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know that you said you went into menopause because you were being asked a lot of questions. So what kind of questions were you being asked?
All sorts. It really varied. So a lot of it was about weight and body shape changes. A lot of it was about fatigue and mental health aspect, so the anxiety, mood changes, feeling low or depression, or sleep issues was another big one, and things that, changes to how you look as well, because that can have a huge impact on how you feel. So changes to hair, skin, eyesight, all these things.
Nails.
Everything.
Yeah.
But I suppose the big ones probably are, I hear most, the weight changes, and fatigue and sleep probably are the
Yeah.
main ones. And it's kind of all interlinked as well. A lot of the symptoms and a lot of the questions, it's kind of interlinked as well.
Yeah. So what happens? Because weight is a big one, and
Mm-hmm.
I know that I've certainly put on a lot of weight in this time, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's been particularly helped by HRT either. Many of my other symptoms, I don't know if that's true or not, so maybe you can enlighten me. But many of my symptoms are improved by HRT, but weight has been a real struggle. So what happens to us? What's
Yeah.
going on?
Well, there's a lot going on, to be honest. So what the evidence shows is the average weight gain during the kind of menopause transition is about 2 to 3 kilograms, and that varies quite
Mm,
widely. Some women lose weight during the menopause transition, some gain a lot more. Sometimes it's your body shape is changing, which you might feel that you're gaining weight, but it's just how you're storing body fat, because that changes with the drop in estrogen. We Before menopause, women tend to store fat around the hips and thighs, which is great for childbearing years. But then with the drop in estrogen, that shifts where we store our fat, and it's more stored around the middle section. The menopause belly is often a term that you hear.
mm,
But yeah, so where we store our fat can kind of change our body shape, which can have a huge impact on how we feel and self-confidence. But also what's happening is our muscle mass starts to deteriorate, or it's part of the aging process, but during the menopause transition, that decrease in muscle mass gets faster during that transition, and up to 2 years after you hit menopause, and then it kind of slows down slightly, similar to men, but there's a faster decline. So with the decline in muscle mass means that we reduce our basal metabolic rate, which is the rate we burn calories.
okay.
So we kind of can eat the same amount of food, but because we're not burning them as fast, then we store more fat. So often women find that they've been eating a certain way and certain activity levels, and it's been working really well for them up until kind of perimenopause, and then suddenly it kind of stops working as well. So it's a good time of life to kind of reconsider what you're eating and how you're eating, because your needs are, and your body is changing. So yeah, that's some of the things. Other things are things like insulin resistance, is another thing. So it's harder for the body to regulate blood sugar levels through menopause. Often women have kind of peaks and troughs of energy levels, and they may feel really hungry. Because again, hormones are all linked. So your hunger hormone, for example, can be a bit stronger. So yeah, it's harder to balance blood sugar levels, which is why
Yeah.
eating well, to have that
Yeah.
balance, is so important. So
Yeah.
there's a lot
And
of challenges.
there are, because, and I don't want to depress anybody watching, but because that then is compounded by low energy, and if you've got painful joints, then you
Yeah.
may be less inclined to get out and exercise
Mhm.
and do those things. So we'll maybe dig into a few more of these. Um, Fatigue and low mood, like I've shared on this before. So energy, i had my second daughter quite late, um so I was 39, and then I think it wasn't long after that I went into perimenopause. I feel like I had a slight lift and then a total drop again. And energy was one of the first things I noticed. Like, as I said, I went to a nutritionist because I just felt like I was wading through treacle. I was exhausted and I couldn't get enough sleep. Well, I couldn't get enough sleep because I had two children, but you know, and so that that was one of the early warning signs, I think, for
Yeah.
me. Although I didn't know it at the time, would that be common then? That energy is one of the first things people
Yeah, I mean,
recognize.
everyone's different. Everyone's menopause journey is going to be different, and some women don't have any symptoms. Thinking of the positives, I think
Yeah,
but and most women have a variety of symptoms at some point, and certainly energy levels or feeling fatigued is one of the very common symptoms. It could be due to a number of different reasons, or a knock-on impact of another symptom like changes in sleep or not sleeping as well, or feeling anxious. So yeah, and it can have a knock-on impact on, as you say, exercise, and food choices as well. If you're not if you're feeling tired, chances are you're not wanting to go to the shops to buy nice food to spend time in the kitchen preparing a nice, healthy, balanced meal. So it can impact your dietary choices as well. But certainly there's quite a few dietary changes or things that you can do to help with fatigue. Some simple things like making sure you're hydrated, which is something that sounds so simple, but drinking enough throughout the day can really help with energy levels. Avoiding that kind of blood sugar roller coaster as well. So avoiding the peaks and troughs of energy. So some people avoid snacks, thinking about weight, or skip a meal, which is kind of counterintuitive or counterproductive rather, because then your blood sugar dips quite low and you start craving a quick fix, which is kind of a biscuit or something
yeah.
sugary or
Nice bit of chocolate.
quick.
Yeah, yeah.
But then
And
what happens is you go sky high again, and peaks and troughs, which just for energy levels is not good.
yeah, yeah. And so thinking about that then, like what are some of the things? So obviously we can all drink more water. And
Well done.
but I do have to make a really concerted effort to drink a lot of water. What else then can the snacks? What are some good snacks that we could be having around us?
Yeah, so I always say something with protein and a good quality carbohydrate. So protein and produce type of snack. So something like biscuits and cheese, or a yogurt and fruit, or hummus and some vegetable sticks,
Yeah,
or something that will give you some protein and fiber, because that helps give you, or protein and kind of a carbohydrate that's higher in fiber to give you that energy that's kind of slow release, steady supply of energy, and protein to help maintain muscle mass, which is so good for your basal metabolic rate and weight management and feeling satisfied as well. And just lots of
yeah.
variety of plant foods, beans and pulses and nuts and seeds, and different grains. They're all really useful for nourishing our gut microbiome.
Yeah, yeah. I do
Yeah.
legumes. I was told, yeah, but apple and peanut butter
Yeah,
would be
that's a good
one
one.
of my favorites. My mid-afternoon pick
Yeah.
me up is a few chunks of apple and some peanut
I've
butter,
got one of the best
definitely.
gadgets as well for the apple, because I always like, the apple slicer thing that you just put on top of an apple and press it down and it slices it into different segments. So that I
Oh,
find that really handy for that kind of snack, because it's so quick and it's like adult
yeah,
finger food, I think. Just that with a dollop
yeah,
of nut butter on top.
yeah. Well, actually, my kids are
All
addicted
right.
to it. So, um, so brilliant. And anything else then in terms of energy that we could be doing for ourselves? Because I know that I'm not a caffeine
Yeah.
drinker, not through any virtuous thing. I just never have drunk tea or coffee, and it actually makes me feel nauseous,
Okay.
caffeine. So, but I know that there's a lot of women probably, and I don't want to take away the things, but that maybe rely on caffeine to get them through the day. Is that something we can work a little
Yeah.
bit on,
Well, I
or
am a huge coffee lover, and so I would say it is a trigger food for some women for hot flushes, and it's probably not the best for
right?
energy levels because it gives you that kind of temporary energy boost, but it's kind of a false energy. And it can leave you in the long term feeling fatigued. So if you are having a coffee or something with caffeine in it, have it in the morning, like a mid morning or kind of pre lunch, and then switch to decaf after that because it can still have an impact on alertness up to about 8 hours after you drink it. So it can impact sleep. So yeah, switch to a decaf. Decaf coffee actually tastes just as nice as caffeinated coffee, I think. And there's certain antioxidants in
Okay.
coffee that's really beneficial for liver health, which is also something that's important going through perimenopause is to look after your liver. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, which does make me think about the other thing, and there kind of became a culture for a while, and it's rolled back a bit of normalizing the after work wine. And I'm a drinker. I'm not being
Yeah.
virtuous here, but I just wonder, are the risks heightened for us at this stage? And I do hear people complain of worse hangovers and challenges.
Yeah.
So
So again, alcohol can have a bigger impact through the menopause. For some women, again, it depends, everyone's different, but it is something that's worth avoiding or cutting out even for a little while to see if it makes a difference to you, if it helps or if it's beneficial to cut it out completely, because certainly it can take longer to recover the day after, and yeah, it's everyone's individual, so it's probably not the best thing to include in a diet, but yeah.
everything in
Exactly,
moderation, I
yeah.
think, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. But I know it can be easy if you've had a really stressful day. And one of the things that I really help women with is
Mm,
stress, because it is the greatest exacerbator of symptoms.
yeah.
And then if you go and do something then that doesn't help
Mhm.
matters, then you're just piling up the problems. And I know it can feel like a really tricky. It's such a tricky time to navigate. And like you said, it's not all women. We
Mhm.
do, for not everybody has
Mhm.
symptoms. Not everybody has bad symptoms, and we all have different ones.
Mhm.
That do have them. But there is that thing of what can we do for ourselves to help minimize the challenges? And I think when we start to look at stress and where we're maybe putting more stress on ourselves, so I'm a big believer in new boundaries,
Mhm. Yeah.
and different approaches and strategies for stress, which I'll cover in a future session. um so one of the things that doesn't get talked about quite as much is bladder
Mm.
issues. And I know it's something that I'm not loving about the whole perimenopause, but I know there can be different extremes of that. And it's one of those things that maybe women are more embarrassed about. And so have you any tips if you're dealing with that? What what would you
Yeah, I
suggest?
mean, it is such a taboo topic. It just doesn't get talked about at all. And I always, when I'm speaking one to one with women, I always ask about hydration and are you drinking enough, and how much water or fluid you have in a day. And I do find that some women sometimes avoid drinking water because they're kind of self-managing bladder issues, and it's such a taboo topic. We don't really know the stats on how many women this affects, but it's thought to affect about 1 in 5 women potentially have bladder issues. And part of that is because menopause can cause a kind of slackening of the pelvic floor, even in women who haven't had children. And it can also cause kind of dryness, and that means the bladder and urethra are more easily irritated. So often it leads to an urgency to go to the toilet. So when you need to go to the toilet, you really need to go now, or a more frequency going to the toilet, which a lot of women think, oh, it's just part of getting old. I'll just, manage it. I'll just adjust what I do. And even in the workplace, if you have a long workplace meeting, or if you're traveling with somebody or on a train and there's maybe no toilets that you want to use, you kind of say, well, I won't drink water before that, so I don't have to go to the toilet. But by not drinking water and not hydrating, that just exacerbates the issue. It makes your urine more concentrated, which then kind of irritates the bladder more, which leads to further issues. So I think it takes, on average, I read that about 7 years for a woman to actually go to the GP to get help, because they think, oh, I'll just manage it, or it's not that bad. But there are treatments available, and it's something that can have knock-on impacts if you don't address it, because it can have impacts on your life. You might stop going to a gym class because it's embarrassing nipping out of the gym class every 5 minutes to go to the toilet, or jumping around, or having leaks. It's something that can impact you socially and lead to you not exercising as much, not going on a long walk because there's not going to be any toilet facilities, things like that. So it can have a knock-on impact. So it's really important to look at your hydration strategy and talk more openly about bladder issues and seek help early on.
Yeah. And that's the thing, all of these things, the earlier you go and seek help, then the easier it is. Because I know, I think there's a lot of women consider leaving work. A lot of women do, because of the pile up of symptoms. And I think often, even though it's not really talked about, it's those more embarrassing, stigmatized symptoms that are probably the ones that are the straw that breaks the camel's back. And I was running a session a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about blood floods. Again, something that can probably be easily fixed with a trip to the GP. And I am going to bring on a doctor to speak about this. But the thing is, that, like you just said, 7 years was it before
on average
women will go seek help, and that's really sad, actually. But you can so see it. We put ourselves last. We
just muddle through and kind of get on with it.
And I think it's only when we get to breaking point that we go, I really need to do something about this. And then, it's more of an uphill climb. So the more we can talk about it, the more awareness there is. I think that's really important. And I know something else that you're really passionate about, Laura, is women's health in general. We are talking about menopause, but I think a lot of us are maybe blissfully or naively, perhaps is a better word, unaware of some of the risks that exist for women. And actually more awareness could, again, it's that early prevention, early treatment, can really help us. So what do you wish women knew about their health at this stage of life?
I think our health risks do change when we reach menopause. With a drop in estrogen, it impacts a health risk of osteoporosis, which a lot of women are probably aware of. Maybe they're not so much aware of heart health as well. So that risk of heart health or coronary heart disease changes as well once you hit menopause, due to the drop in estrogen, because estrogen's protective for your heart. But what can happen with a lot of women is their cholesterol levels and blood pressure can go up, especially in that 1 year after you hit menopause. And of course, there's no signs or symptoms of high blood pressure or high cholesterol. And looking at statistics, there's 77% of women around that average menopausal age have high cholesterol. And I think it's just something that's not known about. It's not talked about a lot because it's often thought of as a man's disease or something that affects men more. And that is true in the earlier years, up until around kind of 40s, early 50s. And then there's a big switch and more women than men have high cholesterol levels. So it's definitely worth checking your cholesterol levels and blood pressure. But with both of those, dietary changes, some small dietary changes can make a huge difference to cholesterol levels and blood pressure. So looking after your heart health is really important.
Yeah. Give us your top tips then on what can we do for our heart health.
So
we're saving lives here, Laura.
Top tips. Eat more plants, higher fiber foods. So beans and pulses, your legumes, to get more fiber. And reduce, probably the biggest thing is reducing the saturated fat in your diet as much as possible. So that's things that are from kind of pastries or anything made with butter, pastries, biscuits, or anything made with palm oil or coconut oil is really high in saturated fat. So cutting down that as much as possible and replacing it instead with healthy fats, because we still need fat. Unsaturated fats from oily fish and nuts and seeds is really beneficial for heart health. So lots more plants, and there's some really useful cholesterol lowering foods like oats and barley and nuts, a portion of nuts a day, and also soya foods, which kind of helps, the protein in soya foods helps reduce LDL cholesterol. And also it has an added bonus for perimenopausal women, because for some women it helps reduce hot flushes with the phytoestrogens. Right. So including some soya foods in the diet can be really useful.
Okay. Yeah. And the coconut oil surprised me there, because it's kind of become the trendy oil and people use it a lot. So it's not.
It used to have a health halo around it, and everyone was kind of having coconut oil or thinking it was healthy, but it's really high in saturated fat. And there is an argument saying, oh, but it's the healthier types of saturated fats. But still, it's something that it can impact your cholesterol levels in a negative way. So it's great for flavor, and I do use it sometimes in kind of Asian cooking because it adds a lovely flavor, but it's not a regular oil that I use in the kitchen. I tend to use olive oil or rapeseed oil, which is
I'm a big fan of rapeseed oil, particularly as we could get so much of it here.
It is good. It's healthy.
Healthy, local, and okay. So heart health is obviously a big thing. Is there anything else that we should be aware of in terms of our general health? We've maybe covered
heart health, bone health, obviously osteoporosis. I think the stats as well in that are quite shocking, that women over 50, so 1 in 2 women over 50 will have a fracture or a bone breakage. The equivalent figure in men is 20%. So it's much more common in women than in men. So looking after your bones, really important.
You've just made me. I fractured my ankle over the summer and didn't even know it.
Oh, right.
At the time, I'd since had it seen to, and thankfully it's healing okay. But and so you don't think like I'm 49 now, but when a lot of this stuff starts, I know we're talking about it now, and perimenopause has become a term that people know and hear. They don't necessarily know what it means. And so I think it'd be good for us to chat about that. But also it's the fact that this stuff is hitting much earlier than the brochures told us
Yeah,
it was going
yeah,
to, the non-existent
yeah,
brochures. But you know, the expectation that we had was this was a problem for our 50s, and
yeah.
yeah, that's
It's
not
true
true.
because I mean the average age in the UK is 51 of when you hit menopause, but menopause is actually a specific. It's one day. It's a time point. Yeah.
One
So
day,
peri means around. So that time around menopause is when you start to possibly experience symptoms, or your periods start getting a bit closer together or further apart, or you might skip one, or they might get heavier or lighter. So that's perimenopause. And the average age of menopause is 51, as I say. It's actually younger for people of Afro-Caribbean or different ethnic
yeah,
minorities. They tend to have a slightly younger average age of hitting menopause. But symptoms generally start quite a few years before you hit menopause. And that menopause time point tends to occur anywhere between 45 and 55. So, if symptoms might start or changes might start a couple of years before that. So it's really from late 30s, early 40s to start
yeah,
thinking about, how do I prepare for this transition, and is my diet optimized, and am I doing the right type of exercise? So it's probably a lot
yeah.
earlier than what we think we should be thinking about menopause. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. And we also have to acknowledge that it can happen at any
yeah,
stage post
yeah,
puberty. And you know, it's hard enough for women at my age, where it's the expected
mm,
thing. But if that's hitting you really early in life, and you know, women aren't believed,
mhm,
women aren't supported, and so I always feel like a duty to share that message that you could have a colleague, a friend, a family member that's going through this in their late teens, their
yeah,
20s, their early 30s, and of course medical
mhm,
reasons can put you into to early
yeah,
menopause and multiple menopause
yeah,
experience. You know, that's the other thing. So I think we need to, that awareness really helps with openness and
mhm,
understanding and support for women that are going
yeah.
through the
And it's not just women that
yeah.
need to know or be aware of menopause. It's,
No, no.
menopause
Yeah,
affects everyone, whether directly or
it
indirectly. So
does.
everyone's got a
Yeah,
partner or a
yeah,
auntie or a sister or a colleague who's potentially going through
yeah.
menopause. Yeah,
Yeah, and it's not just, of course, you know, it's people that have menstruated will go through
yeah,
menopause, so it may not just
yeah.
affect a woman, but yeah, it is that awareness. Well, I've learned a lot already, but is there, if there was any last bits of advice, so any last things that you think are really helpful for anyone watching to know, what would your last tips be?
Gosh, I would say thinking more of the positives. Um, your body's going through a lot of change, so it's a great opportunity to get more in tune with what your body's telling you, because everyone's so unique. And one of the methods that I use in my coaching is a mindful eating approach, and there's lots of different techniques on mindful eating, which can really help as you go through that menopause transition to find out what works best for you in terms of what to eat and how to eat. Um, so getting to know your body is really useful, I would say, during perimenopause, and understanding your cues for hunger and fullness and the different types of hunger, and being more mindful of what you eat to help give you the confidence to know what's right for you, because everyone's different. And from what you read on social media, so and so is trying this, or this works for them, or they're trying this supplement, and it's so tempting to do what somebody else is doing just because it's worked for them doesn't mean it's going to work for you. So I think getting more in tune with yourself and what your needs are and what's best for you is really beneficial and worthwhile doing.
Brilliant. I love that advice, because I think it is a time of life. We've put everybody else first for so long. I think it's a time, to really reconnect with yourself in every way and your needs, and put in boundaries and be there for yourself as much, if not more so, as you are there for others. And so, listening to your body and
being
what's
kind to
going
yourself as well, because you're going through
on.
a huge change, and it is challenging. So give yourself a break and be kind to yourself, and do stuff for you.
Yeah, I like that. The change doesn't really cut it. The huge change
massive change.
is getting a bit closer to it. Yeah. And also that reminder that it's not, we all, not everybody will experience some of the bigger challenges. And so not to be afraid of it, that your experience will be your experience. Well, thank you so much, Laura. I really appreciate you taking the time. I just want to remind everybody of your book, Eating Well for Menopause. So if you want to get the full lowdown on how you can look after yourself nutritionally through this time, then people can get that. And of course, they can follow you on laurawyness.com. And of course, she's linked onto this stream, so link in with Laura, and I'm sure she will welcome you reaching out for support.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. I can't believe it. Time passed so quickly there.
I know, it's shocking, isn't it? We could have talked all day. But thank you so much. And if there's any questions, you watch this and have any questions, then do reach out to Laura, and I'm sure she'll be happy to help. Thank you.
Thanks.